7 inmates break out of a high-security prison in New Mexico. State and local police call in the FBI. They begin a desperate search to find these dangerous men. The escapees, all violent criminals, threaten the public and terrify the community. Investigators must capture these men before they rob, rape, and kill again.
In 1987, the New Mexico Penitentiary housed hundreds of violent offenders, rapists, killers, men that juries put behind bars to protect society. On July 4th, 7 of those men escaped. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. It was one of the worst prison breaks police and the FBI had ever faced. For the innocent people caught in the prisoners' paths, it was the most terrifying ordeal of their lives.
The North Unit at the Penitentiary of New Mexico outside Santa Fe is a Level 6 facility.
Open up B3.
It houses some of the state's most violent offenders, armed robbers, rapists, and murderers. Convicted killer William Gilbert is the assigned janitor for his cell block. For Gilbert, July 4th, 1987 is Independence Day.
Tell me your name and you get Wilson to open the door.
He forces his way into the control room.
Open up the door. Get down! No, get away! Come on, move it! Get over here!
Gilbert releases 6 other inmates. They join him in the control room. The inmates climb a ladder to an emergency hatch that leads to the roof. They take one of the guards with them as a hostage. The inmates walk along the roof searching for an exit. They are looking for a spot where the perimeter fence meets the building entrance so they can jump to the ground. Once they get down, they handcuff the guard to a fence and disappear into the night. The guard quickly frees himself and goes for help. Prison officials are stunned when they realize several dangerous inmates are now on the outside. Somehow, Gilbert got a gun inside the prison. He managed to get past the unit's security in less than 2 minutes. Because of budget cuts, there was no guard in the tower overlooking the roof area where the men escaped. Also, the security sensors on the roof were not functioning. The prison officials have no idea if the inmates were aware of this or if they just got lucky. The prison goes into lockdown. Officials begin a search of the immediate area around the prison. The escapees only have a 15-minute lead. The warden calls the New Mexico State Police. They want the roads sealed off and every officer on the lookout for the escaped convicts. Not certain how many escaped, guards conduct an emergency head count. They find 7 inmates are missing from the North facility, home to the prison's most dangerous inmates. Next, the entire prison is searched to determine if any of the escapees are still hiding within the prison complex. The 7 men are nowhere to be found.
Storage area is clear. Going to second location.
Local police and sheriff's departments are given the inmates' descriptions and warned to be on the lookout. Prison officials brief investigators from the New Mexico State Police. Former Lieutenant Mark Radosevich.
We have to develop an investigative plan, a public notification plan, and an apprehension plan, and they all have to be working simultaneously. If we fail to do them in an appropriate manner or in a timely manner, the results could be devastating.
The prison is 14 miles from the heart of Santa Fe, and several residential areas are within a few miles of the complex. Investigators fear the inmates are desperate enough to resort to violence. The prison staff identifies the 7 escapees. William Gilbert is a 4-time killer. His death sentence was commuted to life in prison when New Mexico abolished the death penalty in 1986. James Kinslow is a serial rapist and killer. At the age of 22, he was sentenced to 3 life terms. David Gallegos is serving a sentence for armed robbery. Robert Davis is a former police officer turned armed robber. John Schmidt, Hector Torres, and Michael Romero are all violent criminals serving lengthy sentences. The New Mexico State Police assigned David Osuna as the case agent.
Previous on him. I could hear the other people from the Department of Corrections saying, oh no, it's Jimmy Kinslow. Oh no, it's William Wayne Gilbert. David Gallegos, probably the most notorious and dangerous individuals at the penitentiary of New Mexico.
Deputy Warden Keith Norwood.
They're serving life sentences. What do they have to lose if they're outside the perimeter fence and within the community? They had nothing to lose.
The time factor in catching an escapee is critical. You have 24, 48 hours to catch these individuals. After that, there's a good chance that they've gotten outside of the perimeter.
As minutes turn to hours, state and local police expand the search area to a 10-mile radius around the prison. Carlos Maldonado was a criminal investigator with the New Mexico State Police at the time of the breakout.
We went into each cell and brought out clothing from each of the escapees, and we sent them with the dog handler. And they would go out in the perimeter of the facility and start seeing if they could pick up a trail. The immediate need was to apprehend and recapture these individuals before they used any sort of violence against our citizens. The stress level for us in the law enforcement arena was considerable.
This was one of the most intensive searches that I've ever participated in. We had individuals on 3-wheelers running around. We had people on horseback. I mean, if there was a way to search for these inmates, we'd look for it. The state police had a chopper flying around, and it had a flare with it.
FLIR, forward-looking infrared, is a special camera mounted underneath the helicopter.
With that flare, they were able to locate body heat off of the ground.
Police helicopters coordinate with search teams on the ground.
We could provide immediate response to any potential sightings. In the absence of sightings, we identified areas where we thought individuals could be hiding out, conducted searches. We'd move tactical teams into those areas to conduct foot searches.
We had different teams starting a house-to-house search in the near areas of the penitentiary. And then there were other teams that were following up on the leads, people that were calling in, the suspicious people, and what have you.
Near the prison complex, canine units pick up the escapees' trail.
They were able to maintain a scent trail until they crossed Interstate 25, and then they lost it.
At the edge of the interstate, the trail stops cold. For law enforcement, it's an ominous sign.
If they got a gun into the facility, then more than likely they planned on a vehicle. To escape on foot here in New Mexico, it's kind of difficult because there's not a lot of water, there's a lot of cactus, there's snakes, there's just all kinds of stuff that run around here at night.
The Corrections Department, Mexico State Police, the Sheriff's Department had a series of predetermined roadblock locations that in the event of an escape or an emergency would be manned in a certain order.
Law enforcement expands the search area and calls in officers from all over New Mexico to man the vast network of roadblocks.
Not only do we have the state police, but the Santa Fe City Police Department, Santa Fe County Sheriff's Department, we have different tribal officers here. We have Tusuque, Pojoaque, San Ildefonso, Santa Clara, Santo Domingo. I mean, these all encompass Santa Fe County. And then I believe that we also pulled in officers that were currently in class at the New Mexico Law Enforcement Academy. We basically had an inner perimeter roadblocks and then an outer perimeter roadblocks, just in the event that they somehow got past the first group.
For law enforcement, the pressure is building. If these escaped killers are hiding out in the residential areas around the prison, no one is safe. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, 7 men convicted of robbery, rape, and murder break out of a maximum security prison. Investigators suspect the mastermind is William Gilbert, a 4-time murderer. 7 months before the escape, Gilbert had his death sentence commuted by the governor.
When an inmate escapes, they're looking to get out and never come back.
Former New Mexico State Police investigator David Osuna.
They may do just about anything to keep from being apprehended again, and that includes the possibility of murder.
Authorities need to make the public aware of the danger.
I've never heard of a correctional officer being shot, and it was just my opinion that they'll shoot anybody to get away.
The governor authorizes the use of the National Guard in the fugitive hunt and gives a shoot-to-kill order to police searching for the 7 men. Investigators know that the physical search for the escapees is only part of their task. They need intelligence. Authorities pore over the fugitives' records.
We're going to look at the segregation logs. We're going to see how many phone calls they've made. We're going to see who they've been associated themselves with.
Lieutenant Mark Radosevich.
The institutions keep volumes of records. Anyone on a visiting list, anyone that's come into the institution, when individuals were moved from cells, where they went during the day, can all be located in one form or fashion. It takes time, but you can find those records.
Right now, it seems the escaped inmates have every advantage.
These people have time on their side in terms of planning and strategizing and putting these things together.
Carlos Maldonado was a criminal investigator with the New Mexico State Police.
But as we know, the best conceivable plans always have something going wrong. So we were hoping for that human element to present itself.
Investigators believe at least one other person must have helped the inmates escape.
The weapon that the inmate had, how did it get into the facility to begin with? Could there have been another accomplice that maybe was employed through the correctional facility? We didn't know, but we knew that the weapon gained or entered into the facility somehow.
They also suspect someone close to the inmates must be helping them now, possibly family or friends.
They're going to need to change the clothes. They're going to need food. They're going to need transportation. They're going to need a means to communicate. We have to know early on, if these inmates are going to contact somebody, who would it be? It doesn't take any sort of sophisticated analysis or evaluation to know that it's probably going to be family members that are going to step out on the limb and risk their own freedom to try to help out a loved one. That's kind of the common denominator, and one that we're going to look at immediately.
Investigators compile extensive lists of people associated with the escapees.
We wanted to know exactly who was visiting with who, and to find out if it's another inmate that they showed particular interest in, maybe their family members. So we tried to expand that net as much as we could without depleting resources to the point where you reach the point of diminishing return.
It's a huge undertaking. The FBI joins the search. Former special agent in charge of the Albuquerque FBI office, William Brannon.
What we can do is any out-of-state leads that are developed as a result of this investigation, no matter where they are in the country, we can have an FBI agent on scene within an hour or two to conduct the interview or to gather the information.
At the prison, state police investigators question the inmates, but they have to do it carefully.
Timing was very important when you interview inmates. It's a different world. Everybody's timing everybody else. They're watching. If you spend more time with one particular inmate than you do with somebody else, the first question they're going to ask, I wonder why. Did he divulge any information? And their life is on the line. We had a timer set up. The inmates would come in, we'd talk to them for 20 minutes, and regardless of where we were in the conversation, we'd send them back.
The inmates of the North Unit say they were not aware of the escape plan.
These guys kept that plan pretty confidential. And for inmates not to know things what's going on, especially in their pod, that's pretty unusual.
Investigators also question prison personnel. They learned that days before the breakout, guards confiscated copies of state police and prison radio codes from Robert Davis's cell. Hours after the escape, guards made another surprising discovery in Davis's cell. Aeronautical charts and maps of Mexico.
Was that truly part of a plan to take a plane, to hijack a plane, to drive to Mexico? Or is it to send us off in a direction 180 degrees from where they're really at?
We sent an officer over to the airport in Santa Fe.
State police ask airport security to be on the lookout.
Bob Davis, although he's an inmate at the facility, is a very intelligent individual.
This was not an escape of opportunity. It was well planned. High-risk individuals. They were highly motivated.
Investigators need help and appeal to the public.
We want the local people to call in if they see one of these individuals.
Police release the fugitives' mugshots and rap sheets to the press.
And more importantly, they need to know how dangerous these individuals are so that they don't allow them in their houses, don't assist them in any way.
They were our eyes and ears. They started airing footage on the history of each of the inmates.
Thousands of calls overwhelmed police hotlines.
Anybody who saw anything unusual in Santa Fe or within 40 miles of Santa Fe were calling the police departments or the Crime Stoppers hotline, reporting suspicious or unusual activity.
While investigators sort through tips, they work to close off every avenue for escape.
Santa Fe was completely locked down. I mean, everybody from the governor on down was exceedingly concerned about this. The whole state of New Mexico was concerned about it.
The residents of Santa Fe are terrified.
Because they're constantly living in a state of fear that somebody might break into their house, somebody might cause harm to their family, somebody could be killed. It was just my opinion and the opinion of the investigators that these inmates were still in the Santa Fe area. We felt very strongly that they had not escaped our perimeters.
2 days after the escape, a homeowner in Santa Fe reports a break-in at his house. Police find a prison jumpsuit. The find indicates that some or all of the inmates may still be in the Santa Fe area. Then on that same day, 2 miles from the penitentiary of New Mexico, at a local racetrack, a security guard makes his rounds.
A security guard who was on his toes saw this individual walking through the racetrack.
Come here, where are you going? Come on over here, sir.
He confronted the individual, and after a quick discussion, realized this was probably one of our escapees. He was able to handcuff the guy, call local officials.
New Mexico State Police identify the trespasser as Hector Torres, one of the 7 escaped inmates.
With one captured, there's always the possibility that the other ones are close by.
1 inmate has been found. Authorities dispatch a SWAT team to the racetrack to search for the other 6 convicts. If the other men are hiding at the track, police have them cornered. But that is when these men are most dangerous. Outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico, 7 convicts escape from a maximum security prison. 1 man is in custody, and SWAT teams search a racetrack complex for the other 6 escapees. There is no sign of the remaining fugitives. Investigators' only lead to their whereabouts is Hector Torres, the man they captured.
Where are the rest of the guys?
Carlos Maldonado was a criminal investigator with the New Mexico State Police.
When we interviewed him, he said he walked for hours. Didn't know where he was going. Just continued walking and walking and walking. And he said, before I knew it, and he was so fatigued, he was tired, he wound up back at the penitentiary.
I don't know.
Torres claims he knew nothing about the escape before Gilbert opened his cell.
There was no plan.
He just knew that he was free for the moment and took advantage of that.
You don't know where
According to Torres, 4 inmates stuck together: Gilbert, Davis, Kinslow, and Gallegos.
But the rest pretty much just scattered in different directions.
Investigators suspect these 4 prisoners planned the escape. Gilbert only released Torres, Romero, and Schmidt to distract law enforcement. Former FBI Special Agent in charge, William Brannon.
It was a pretty good thing to do as far as the ringleaders were concerned, because they would put these people loose and out there, and who didn't have a plan, who didn't know where they were going to go. This would certainly occupy law enforcement in running these individuals down.
3 days after the escape, police believe 6 of the inmates are still somewhere near the Santa Fe area. Armed robber Michael Romero and violent offender John Schmidt, 4-time murderer William Gilbert, armed robber and former cop Robert Davis, serial rapist James Kinslow, and robber David Gallegos. The men pose an incredible threat to the citizens in the area.
There was no doubt in law enforcement mind that there were going to be home invasions, and that these people, they had to seek food, they had to seek shelter, and they had to seek transportation to get out of the area.
On July 7th, authorities' worst fears are realized. In a suburb of Santa Fe, a teenager babysits her young cousin.
She looked out the window and saw a man coming to the house. She was so paranoid, as everybody was in Santa Fe. She was able to call the police to say that somebody suspicious was approaching.
One of those guys is trying to break in. Oh no, he's trying to break into the window. Oh no, he's at the door. He's at the door. Please come, hurry.
Put the phone down! Put the phone down!
What do you want?
I need something to eat. I need some food. I need some food. Come on.
Incredibly, the intruder only steals a bag of bread, then flees. Police arrive quickly. Investigators ask the teenager if she can identify her attacker. Former New Mexico State Police investigator David Osuna.
This young lady identified David Gallegos as one of the escapees who broke into her house.
SWAT teams converge on the area.
Law enforcement officers searched every home within a mile radius during that time looking for the escapees.
Gallegos and the other 5 fugitives are nowhere to be found.
When you get a call like that, and the idea is that these inmates have broken into a home and they're taking clothes and food, that means they're trying to change their identity as an inmate. They're trying to mix in with the general public and maybe go to a restaurant or do whatever some of the local people do. But they're looking for a way to get out of the Santa Fe County area.
Stay, please.
The next day, there's another sighting. 85 miles south of Santa Fe, a highway patrol officer sees something strange on the back of a flatbed truck. When he pulls the truck over,
You, let me see your hands.
a man is hiding on the back.
Slowly down, slowly. Come on down. Hands up.
Get on the ground. Get your hands out in front of you.
It is one of the escapees, former police officer turned armed robber, Robert Davis.
All right, tell me about
The New Mexico State Police questions Davis.
What are you gonna do for me?
The interview with Bob Davis was instrumental in breaking this case wide open. What Bob was able to tell us is how this plan developed from the initial stages all the way to the escape, and where probably the other 3 important escapees were currently at.
According to Davis, Gilbert, Kinslow, and Gallegos are hiding out together. As police suspected, a relative of David Gallegos is helping them.
This relative was going to take him to a storage facility here in Santa Fe where they would be housed until the roadblocks were down, and then a relative of David Gallegos would once again meet them, bring them to Albuquerque, and they would make their escape all the way to California.
Former New Mexico State Police Lieutenant Mark Radosevich.
But I think there was a sense from the investigative team and the management team that the information wasn't exact, but it was credible.
Based on Davis's statement that the men planned to cross state lines, New Mexico State Police contact the FBI.
Ultimately, I think the FBI found that there was enough information that the individuals might have left the state of New Mexico, then giving them federal jurisdiction.
The FBI decided to file an unlawful flight to avoid confinement complaint. This is called a UFAC complaint.
The FBI's UFAC casts a dragnet across the nation. Agents around the country are now on the lookout for the convicts. The manhunt intensifies. In New Mexico, investigators turn their attention to trying to find the storage unit. According to Davis, it was rented under a fake name and address. Agents and police searched the records of every storage facility near the airport in Santa Fe. They checked the names and addresses in the files, all of which are valid.
Let me give you my card. You do see
The fact that we couldn't find Gilbert, Kinslow, or Gallegos indicated to us that they probably had some type of help and somebody was hiding them in the Santa Fe area.
Agents and state police trying to find out who is helping the fugitives investigate the people closest to them.
The FBI tracked them down, found their locations, determined what type of people they were, whether or not they could have been involved in assisting the people in the prison break, and we eliminated a lot of these people as probably not having been involved, but we came up with a handful who we thought might have been involved, and among them was Gallegos' brother-in-law.
The different agents, including myself, found themselves in Albuquerque a lot, interviewing members of the David Gallegos family.
newspaper.
According to Gallegos' brother-in-law, he has not been contacted by the fugitives. He has no idea where they are. Investigators suspect he is lying. Several more days go by. The roadblocks stay up. Hundreds of officers continue to search for the remaining 5 fugitives. Even if it's true that 3 of the escapees are on their way to California, 2 remain somewhere in the Santa Fe area. July 11th, 7 days since the breakout. A 17-year-old girl is house-sitting in an exclusive neighborhood. She has no idea she is not alone. 2 gunmen suddenly appear. They demand the teenager's car keys.
Come on, you didn't hear nothing, you didn't see nothing.
She notifies the Santa Fe police. As an officer responds to the scene, he spots 2 of the fugitives coming straight at him.
410 vehicle spotted in pursuit.
The officer swerves just in time. The fugitives aren't so lucky.
You would think that both of them would get hurt and injured because it was a good crash. It wasn't just like a little fender bender.
Michael Romero is captured, but Schmidt is able to run from the scene. He's hiding somewhere in the neighborhood, possibly injured, and desperate to do whatever it takes to remain free. In New Mexico, 3 prison escapees have been recaptured. 4 are still on the run. On the morning of July 11th, a Santa Fe resident notices a blood trail leading to his garage. He notifies police. The house is in the neighborhood where Michael Romero was arrested and John Schmidt disappeared the night before. Officers follow the trail of blood to the homeowner's garage.
Put your hands where I can see them.
There, they find John Schmidt.
This individual was arrested in a garage near the governor's mansion in downtown Santa Fe, which caused a little bit of a stir.
Former FBI Special Agent in Charge William Brannon.
After the first 4 individuals had been apprehended, the only people on the loose were Gilbert, Kinslow, and Gallegos.
They are the 3 most dangerous escapees. 4-time murderer William Gilbert, serial rapist James Kinslow, and robber David Gallegos. But nearly 3 weeks after the escape, the investigators are running out of time and money.
Not only had the main players not been caught, but now we were looking at a great expense in keeping these roadblocks up and using the manpower that were available. So finally, a command decision was made, pull the roadblocks.
David Osuna of the New Mexico State Police questions Robert Davis again. Davis sticks to his story.
He was insistent that they're here in Santa Fe and that they're at a storage shed. You know, and honestly, I believed him.
Agents and police continue following the only lead they have.
So please step behind the vehicle.
They take another look at all the storage facilities in the Santa Fe area.
We finally end up at this one storage facility off of Airport Road.
All right, ready?
Let's go.
Now. Nothing.
At this facility, investigators find that several people occupied one of the units for an extended period of time.
Nothing. I didn't see anything.
Investigators find a tiny hole drilled through the concrete wall of the storage unit.
And they could actually see, although it was a very small hole, traffic going by, people going by and talking, what have you.
Lieutenant Mark Radosevich.
The agents did check that particular location repeatedly, went through the records, but there were some cards that had been inadvertently stored in another file cabinet that were not provided to the agents on any of their visits. Again, we were that close.
The discovery of the storage unit confirms the agent's suspicions that the fugitives are receiving outside help.
We felt that someone had to have contact with that group.
investigators surveil the remaining fugitives' family members. Former New Mexico State Police criminal investigator Carlos Maldonado.
We use a technique where it's not aggressive, but it's obvious surveillance. Where they look out the window, they know that you're parked out there.
37, go ahead.
Yeah, he's on the move right now.
And it's to raise the stress level so that hopefully mistakes are made.
Agents set up PIN registers, a device that enables them to track the numbers of all incoming and outgoing calls on the phone lines of a select number of the fugitives' associates and family members.
We had a PIN register installed on a particular individual, and on the 21st day, that individual received a call from a motel in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
We sent an FBI agent and a state police agent to that motel.
FBI agent.
They show the desk clerk photos of the remaining fugitives.
You have seen them before?
Yeah, I have seen.
The desk clerk recognizes the three men. She says they checked out of the hotel a few minutes ago.
Did you notice what type of car they were?
Police and FBI agents search the area. There is no sign of the fugitives.
We recognized that Wayne Gilbert and Jimmy Kinslow and David Gales had probably left the state. We didn't get any more tips, no phone calls, no nothing.
Investigators believe California is a likely destination. They know Gallegos has relatives there. And recaptured escapee Robert Davis mentioned California. Authorities contact police agencies and FBI offices in California to be on the lookout for the three men. They believe the three fugitives are traveling together. Authorities most fear Jimmy Kinslow.
They just knew or felt or believed that because of his background, being a stone-cold killer and rapist, that he was going to do that again.
The FBI's fears are justified. In Arizona, Kinslow has already identified a victim. 7 inmates make a daring escape from prison. Only 3 escapees remain free. They are heading west, and 1 is taking hostages. Convicted murderer and rapist Jimmy Kinslow forces his way into an Arizona home.
Don't move! You move, I'll kill you right now!
He demands to know if there are any guns inside.
Don't move!
Former FBI Special Agent in Charge, William Brannon.
He obtained several handguns, a shotgun, and I believe 4 rifles. So now he's very highly armed.
He forces the entire family into the car. Kinslow orders the father to drive from Flagstaff to Barstow, California, a 350-mile trip. In Barstow, he holds the family hostage in a motel room. 3 hours later, he leaves the motel. He takes the couple's 11-year-old daughter with him.
He leaves in their car with the 11-year-old and leaves the area. The mother and father are able to free themselves from their being tied up.
Go get the police, quick. Oh, hurry, please.
They notify the Barstow Police Department.
Barstow police immediately contact the FBI.
He's got my little girl.
The FBI responded to the area and began looking for the car that Kinslow was using.
Former Special Agent in Charge of the Los Angeles FBI office, Bucky Cox.
The fact that Kinslow now was on the loose with an 11-year-old girl notches this up considerably. There is no type of case in law enforcement that gets law enforcement's attention more than the possible harm to a child.
Agents and police search the streets looking for the abducted family's van. 2 hours later, they get an incredible break. The 11-year-old girl approaches a police car in Garden Grove, California, 115 miles from Barstow.
All right, hold on a second. Step
She
back.
tells the police officer she was abducted in Flagstaff, Arizona by an escaped convict along with the rest of her family.
What's happening?
The kidnapper drove her around for several hours before dropping her off behind a restaurant.
And says to her, "You stay here. I'm going to come back. If you're gone, I'll find you." Well, as soon as he left, she disobeyed that order and walked out to the street and flagged down a patrol car.
She gives police an accurate description of Jimmy Kinslow. According to the girl, the kidnapper is still driving her father's car. She tells them she overheard him making plans to meet friends at a trailer park somewhere nearby. Garden Grove police spread out and search the area looking for the abducted family's car. They quickly spot it.
Garden Grove didn't approach that vehicle. They backed off of it to establish a surveillance to see if they could catch someone coming to that vehicle. They backed off in such a manner as not to tip anybody off that they were in the area and had any interest in that vehicle.
An FBI SWAT team sets up a forward command post in a strip mall 2 blocks from the trailer park.
We didn't want to be in a position where we could be observed by anyone who might be going to that vehicle or have anything to do with that vehicle.
Garden Grove detectives maintain surveillance on the van.
All of a sudden, an excited voice came across the radio. The lights are on in the van, and it's fired up. Meaning somebody had started the van, turned the lights on, and seconds later, the van is moving. It's rolling.
Vehicle's about to move. It's backing up.
They pull out in pursuit. Investigators thought the vehicle was empty. Apparently, Kinslow was inside all along. The convicted murderer and rapist is finally in their sights.
The FBI had to make a decision. Did they want to follow the car, see where it took them to try to capture Gilbert and Gallegos, or should they immediately arrest Kinslow? They made the absolute correct decision and decided to immediately take down Kinslow.
FBI agents and Garden Grove police converge on all 4 sides of the vehicle.
He's got a van in front of him. He's got FBI behind him. I think there's a Garden Grove patrol car behind him. I'm actually coming the opposite way and turn in towards the side, so he has no place to go at this point.
Kinslow is outmanned and outgunned. But police fear this ruthless murderer will not go down without a fight. In Garden Grove, California, agents and police have dangerous fugitive Jimmy Kinslow cornered. Investigators fear they are in for a fight.
Let me see your hand!
Jimmy Kinslow finally gives up.
All right, down! Come on! Get up! You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to have an attorney. You can't afford one. One will be appointed to you.
Investigators search the fugitive's car and make a chilling discovery. Former special agent in charge of the Los Angeles FBI office, Bucky Cox.
We looked down, and there was a .357 Magnum pistol, revolver, that was laying on the floorboard on the driver's side.
Investigators find additional weapons in the back of the vehicle. Kinslow is interrogated at the Garden Grove police station. Agents need to know where the remaining 2 fugitives are.
Okay, the more you help us,
Police
the better.
turn up the pressure.
The hotel rates, the
Although Kinslow has nothing to lose, he starts to talk.
Fire station motel.
Former FBI Special Agent in charge, William Brannan.
There's no honor among these guys. Kinslow's told us where Gilbert and Gallegos were.
According to Kinslow, the last two fugitives are staying at a motel in Garden Grove, California. He doesn't know the room number, but he can describe the room's location.
Kinslow agrees to draw a sketch of the motel and of the room. And then he also tells us that another family member is there that had helped Gallegos and Gilbert and actually brought them to the motel.
Gilbert and Gallegos are on the second floor. The family member is in the room directly beneath them. From their command post 2 blocks from the motel, the FBI decides whether to raid the rooms. The fugitives are armed. They have nothing to lose. And the motel is full of innocent people.
That's a sketch that I drew based on information the suspect.
We could get, in law enforcement terms, burned. They'll spot us, and now we've got really a dangerous situation on our hands. Conversely, if we hit the wrong room, then it's going to wake up the whole neighborhood, and we've got a dangerous situation on our hands. So we weighed the options.
It's a risky operation, but losing the fugitives is even riskier. The FBI decides to raid the motel rooms.
All straight, ready to go.
So here we had 2 separate rooms, one where the remaining 2 escapees from New Mexico are located, and the other one where the people who assisted or facilitated the escape are staying.
Ready to go? Let's go. Let's do this thing. All right.
So what we decided is we are going to do a SWAT entry on the room with the 2 fugitives, and we are going to do basically a knock and announce on the room down below as soon as the flashbang goes off.
At 6:30 a.m., an FBI SWAT team forcibly enters room 243 at the motel.
No knock was made. A device called a flashbang was thrown in. It immediately disorients whoever is in the room.
William Gilbert and David Gallegos are quickly taken into custody.
Don't move!
Inside the motel room, agents find 2 sawed-off shotguns and a revolver, along with a large quantity of ammunition.
I think once these 3 individuals got to the motel, they probably figured that they had pulled it off and that they were going to get off scot-free. But not so, because technology and law enforcement caught up with them.
All 7 fugitives are finally back in custody.
It was an exhilarating experience when they were caught because the team had done their job. It was great.
On July 31st, 27 days after the escape, the last of the fugitives are returned to the penitentiary of New Mexico. Their breakout had been months in planning. To this day, no one knows how Gilbert got a gun inside the prison. After the escape, New Mexico built a new prison with more modern security features. Thanks to the hard work of the New Mexico law enforcement agencies and the FBI, Michael Romero, Robert Davis, John Schmidt, and Hector Torres face additional charges. William Gilbert, Jimmy Kinslow, and David Gallegos will spend the rest of their lives in prison. They work with perfect precision, stalking their prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. The payoffs are huge, millions of dollars for a few minutes of violent work. They leave no evidence behind, but to get away, they're willing to leave bodies. The FBI and local police must stalk this dangerous gang of thieves and break up their bad company.
In Boston, FBI agents and local police tracked a gang of robbers who specialized in armored car takedowns. Their MO was familiar. The gang used precise timing to steal millions in cash and burn their getaway cars to destroy evidence. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. As the robberies grew more violent, agents launched a complex sting to trap a deadly ring of thieves and shut down their dangerous operation.
December 22nd, 1987. Outside Boston, Massachusetts, just before 8 a.m. A time when most professionals are heading to work. But today, a group of professional criminals are also on their way to a job. Their target is Weymouth, 18 miles south of Boston. They arrive at a bank at 8:30 a.m. and sit tight.
Here they come.
They aren't waiting for the bank to open.
All right, guys, lock and load.
The heist is on.
See those hands? Hands up! Hands up! Clock, let's go! Let's go! Give me a key. Let's work on what you hold. Give me the key. Guys, run the clock. Go! 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 Let's go! Let's go! Hurry up! Let's go! Gotta get out of here. Put your hands up! Look down. Don't you look at me. Don't you look at him.
They stop a few hundred yards away behind a nearby shopping center.
Hands up! Get out! Get out! Get out! Don't move!
Let's go, guys. Come on, let's go.
Get some water.
Clock. Come on, guys. Let's go. Come on, you guys. Hurry up. Hurry up. Come on, let's go. We're on the clock. Let's go. Come on, we're almost there. Let's go. Let's go.
The men get away with over $1 million. It's one of the largest armored car heists in Massachusetts history. Weymouth police get the call about the robbery and notify the FBI. Police officers and agents respond within minutes. FBI Special Agent Jim Crawford is among the first to arrive at the scene.
I was in that immediate area for unrelated reasons, conducting an investigation. I heard on my radio that there had been a robbery of an armored truck in Weymouth. Upon arriving at the scene, which was just probably a few minutes after the robbery, I proceeded into the parking lot area. I observed several money bags that were left outside on the ground that the robbers did not take with them. That was the most surprising fact that I observed immediately.
While investigators are working the scene, they receive a report of a burning blue van fitting the description of the getaway vehicle. The van is less than a quarter mile from the bank.
There was a vehicle there that had been burning for probably at least 10 minutes, and pretty much it was burned out completely. There was no determination of any vehicle identification number. There was nothing of any evidentiary value found in that vehicle.
At the bank, forensic investigators comb through the front parking lot where the robbery began. They search for anything the robbers might have left behind, but find nothing. Police also process the armored car for clues. Again, they find nothing. The armored car crew tells agents they didn't get a good look at the robbers' faces because they wore masks.
All of them had masks, but I think they were white because I could see one of the eye holes.
The robbers also wore gloves. Forensic techs don't lift a single usable print. What troubles agents most about the heist are the robbers' tactics.
It was very unusual. Gunmen unloaded the vehicle and they had a countdown. One person would serve as the count. He used a stopwatch. They knew exactly how much time they were going to spend perpetrating the robbery. The professionalism that they handled the truck, the getaway area where they had burned out the vehicle, very professionally accomplished.
The job is so professional, agents have almost nothing to go on. The only clue investigators have is puzzling.
I believe they left on the ground over $1 million.
These robbers, whoever they are pros. Leaving that much money to stick to a timetable suggests they've done this before.
This was the most disciplined, the most training, the most cautious group that I've been involved in with 30 years in the FBI.
The agents know this is going to be a tough case to crack. This gang is good, and they probably are not working alone.
Usually on this type of professional robbery, it's always looked at the possibility of an inside person. There was nothing to indicate here that was the case. I know the guards had been interviewed during the course of the investigation, but nothing to indicate that they were involved in this robbery.
The precision of the Weymouth heist reminds Agent Crawford of the string of jobs pulled over 25 years ago by a legendary Boston criminal named Richie Harold.
During later part of 1977, I was the case agent on a robbery of the Wells Fargo armored truck that occurred in Braintree, Massachusetts. As a result of that investigation, I developed sources that indicated the primary suspect in that robbery was an individual by the name of Richie Harold.
In the 1960s and 1970s, Richie Harold and his gang were suspected in multiple armored car robberies which were considered to be perfect crimes. Although no fingerprints are found in Weymouth, Agent Crawford feels Richie Harold had something to do with this.
The similarity between the Weymouth armored truck robbery and the Wells Fargo and Braintree were that they were restricted on time on the Wells Fargo robbery, just as the Weymouth one. They were highly professional in their commanding of the vehicle, the armored truck. They left no witnesses behind, nothing of evidentiary value.
But Richie Harold couldn't have pulled off the Weymouth job. He's dead. The Boston area has always been a haven for armored car robbers. Agents know what to do. They hit the streets and start working the usual suspects.
In the 60s and the 70s, Charlestown was kind of infamous to have a lot of young men that were involved in bank robberies and armored truck robberies. Hijackings of trucks, for example, were very prevalent in the 70s there, and then more professionals got involved with the perpetration of armored truck robberies during the 70s, the 80s.
To broaden their reach, the FBI forms a task force with the Massachusetts State Police and Boston Police Department. They cast a wide net, questioning every informant they have.
You're really depending on confidential sources to lead you at least the right direction, people that are involved in this type of activity.
But the informants don't give the investigators anything. The investigation stalls. And agents know, with a gang this good, it is only a matter of time until they strike again. On December 22nd, 1987, robbers hold up an armored car at a Weymouth, Massachusetts bank and get away with over $1 million. Special Agent Jim Crawford.
They were not foolish at all to go buying large purchases or talking to anyone, and they pretty much operated in secret and were well disciplined to stay away from anybody that might inform on them.
Despite the task force's best efforts, the trail of the Weymouth robbers goes cold. The task force disbands after a year of hard work. Even so, investigators fear they haven't seen the last of the robbers.
I believe that these individuals would strike again. Number one, they were successful. The amounts of money they obtained was very significant. There was no indication to them that they were being closely monitored by the police or the FBI. And it was a matter of time that they were involved in another robbery.
Agents worry they will lose more than money if the robbers strike again.
The individuals that take the task on robbing an armored truck, first of all, go with the idea that they're going to escape and perpetrate this robbery no matter what they have to do. That would include killing police officers.
May 31st, 1989, a year and a half after the Weymouth robbery. At a bank in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, about 60 miles east of Boston. Agents' concerns about violence tragically come true. The robbers take control of the armored car in seconds. Once again, the robbers force the driver to take the armored car around to the back of a shopping center near the bank. It is the exact same MO as the last robbery, only this time they leave very little money behind. Robbing an armored car is more lucrative than a bank heist, according to FBI Special Agent Jim Crawford.
The average bank robbery today, between cameras and bulletproof glass and bait money, it's risky for not a whole lot of money, not substantial sums. If someone wants to spend the time and training on perpetrating an armored truck, the rewards are far greater.
They use a smoke grenade to obscure their escape. As the wounded armored car guard fights for his life, police try to find the men responsible.
Deborah, you saw 3 men come out of here? Yeah, I saw 3 of them.
Officers like Massachusetts State Police Staff Sergeant Richard Rand try to get descriptions of the robbers.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Some saw the robbery in progress, but as far as identifying the individuals or giving significant information about their identity, they were masked, and there was very little information that was provided that could lead to identifying the suspects.
Police see the robbers torched a getaway vehicle. They know the suspects had to find another way to flee. The most likely escape route, into the woods. But there's a deep stream that would be difficult to cross. Further into the woods, investigators find a makeshift bridge over the water.
They'd gone to the time of preparing their exit so that they could get across the stream and probably not get all that wet, so that they would obviously stand out to other people or law enforcement if they were approached in the short time after the robbery.
Officers follow the path and come out in a residential neighborhood. Across the street, a potential witness. Police learn the man saw something suspicious just a few minutes earlier.
Hello, sir.
He watched 3 men walk out of the woods carrying large sacks. Then a car drove up. He didn't get a good look at the men carrying the bags, but he saw the driver. Police issue an APB for the car with 4 men inside and radio the driver's description. Police dispatch helicopters to search for the vehicle. "40 minutes after the robbery, investigators find the robber's car a few miles from the bank. The robbers torched it to destroy the evidence. But unlike the Weymouth robbery, this time some items inside didn't burn, including a blanket, a bank bag which held money, and an unexploded dye marker designed to go off when thieves opened the money bags. Because the dye marker didn't explode, the robbers must be experienced enough to open the money bags without setting them off. This time, the fire didn't destroy the vehicle identification number.
Well, the VIN plates typically survive these fires, and they're visible through the windshield. And first thing that was done by arriving law enforcement was to run the VIN numbers.
Police learned the car was stolen months earlier in Weymouth, Massachusetts. The FBI finally has evidence that could put them on the robbers' trail. May 31st, 1989. The FBI and local police investigate a violent armored car robbery. The robbers get away with over $800,000. The robbers shot an armored car guard in the back. They left him to die in the bank's parking lot. Paramedics rushed the guard to the hospital. Miraculously, he survived. A few miles away from the bank, investigators found a burned getaway car. They recovered the VIN number and determined it had been reported stolen in Weymouth, Massachusetts, months earlier. Police found another torched vehicle in the rear of the bank. They believe the robbers also burned it as a diversion. But police and the FBI get a break. They find a flare inside that was designed to start the fire. It didn't burn completely. This car was also reported stolen, but its ignition was intact. At this scene, the evidence helps the FBI. But the wounded guard signals that these robbers are becoming more dangerous. Even with the evidence left behind, Massachusetts State Police Staff Sergeant Richard Rand fears these robbers will be tough to catch.
They had a good plan in place to execute the robbery. They had a good plan in place to make their escape. And they had a good plan in place to destroy whatever evidence could possibly be left at the scene for law enforcement to gather against them. So they had done their homework, and they knew the armored car schedule, they knew the bank schedule, they knew everything that they needed to know about how to execute their plan, and it was a very well executed plan.
Agents interview witnesses and learn the robbers used duct tape to seal the gap between their sleeves and gloves, as well as their pants and boots.
These robbers were very sophisticated in that they made sure that they didn't shed any evidence at these scenes.
Investigators find no useful evidence inside the armored car, no bullet casings at the scene. The Fitchburg job is so similar to the robbery in Weymouth 18 months earlier that it catches the attention of FBI Special Agent Jim Crawford.
The similarities between the Fitchburg and the Weymouth robbery were that, number one, they were both professionally done. Both robberies were timed. They knew exactly how much time they were going to spend in the area of the victim truck. They used an incendiary device, both on the getaway vehicles. These people knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they knew how to do it.
But the FBI and local police still know very little about this gang, other than the fact that they are experienced and dangerous. It will take every weapon in the FBI's arsenal to bring them down. Investigators follow up on their best clue left by the Fitchburg robbers, the burned car. They learned the car had been reported stolen from South Boston 6 months earlier. But the vehicle's ignition showed no signs of tampering. Police suspect the robbers may have had a key.
I interviewed the owner. He had stated that he had in fact reported the car stolen, but that he had lent the car to a friend, and that friend had come back to him and said that the car was stolen. He'd parked it somewhere and it had been stolen.
The friend who borrowed the car is named Greg Hicks.
FBI. Speak to him a second, please.
Investigators have reason to suspect Hicks himself in the theft.
We came up with the fact that he had a criminal record for a number of petty crimes and auto theft. And it seemed like he had a substance abuse problem.
Craig, we'll show you.
Investigators pressure Hicks to come clean about what happened to the car.
It wasn't particularly difficult. After some conversation about the severity of the crime, that he'd been using an armored car robbery, somebody been shot, these are serious crimes, and that because he was the last person to have the car, and he could be implicated. He had admitted that the car was not in fact stolen, that he'd borrowed the car, and that he'd given the car to a person, and that he'd gone back to the owner of the car and told him that the car was stolen so that the owner would report it stolen.
Greg Hicks also admits to stealing the sedan used in the Fitchburg robbery. He says he gave both vehicles to a man named Carl Tucker the night before the gang struck the armored car in Fitchburg. Investigators hit the streets again, asking their sources about Carl Tucker. Nobody knows anything. They turned to veteran Boston police detective Martin Coleman.
He was a sleeper. We knew nothing about him. He was doing aluminum siding and replacement windows out of a storefront on Broadway in South Boston. He owned the building, but his hobby was robbing armored cars and getting information about armored cars.
Investigators do not have enough evidence to confront Tucker. There are no eyewitnesses to the crime, and he has made no incriminating statements. All they have is Greg Hicks' claim that he gave stolen vehicles to Tucker. Agents tail him, trying to learn more.
We had confidential sources indicate that the persons responsible for these robberies were hanging out at a lounge in South Boston.
Investigators try to learn the identities of Tucker's associates. At the same bar, they see a known bank robber named Fred Rogan. Rogan has a connection to a robber Crawford knows all too well.
He was an individual that came to my attention back in the 70s. He was suspect in the robbery in Braintree, associated with Richie Harold. I had done surveillances in the 70s and seen Richie Harold meet with him. On one occasion, I believed I observed them surveilling a bank in the area of Quincy, Massachusetts.
If Fred Rogan was involved in the two armored car robberies, It would explain how the robbers could pull off such an elaborate job. Almost 2 years after the Weymouth heist and 2 months after the Fitchburg robbery, agents finally have suspects. The question is whether agents can bring down this dangerous gang before it is too late. 2 armored car heists 16 months apart net a gang of robbers over $1.8 million.
Got it? Go.
On the first job, on December 22nd, 1987, the gang left no evidence behind and took over $1 million. It is one of the largest heists in New England history. The second heist didn't net as large a take, but the robbers made an uncharacteristic mistake. They failed to completely torch a getaway car. A VIN number on the vehicle led them to a man named Carl Tucker.
Hey, I'm Stone.
Tucker hangs out at bars frequented by Fred Rogan, the protege of a dangerous but now dead armored car robber named Richie Harold. While agents know quite a bit about Fred Rogan, they know very little about Carl Tucker. Investigators hit Boston's streets to ask contacts in the city's criminal underworld for background on Tucker and any associates he might have. Boston Police Department Detective Martin Coleman is part of the FBI task force investigating the robberies.
We had a pretty good idea who was capable of doing these armored car robberies. And it was, as the saying goes, round up the usual suspects, and that's exactly who we started to look at.
One of the usual suspects is convicted thief Steve Farrell, who just got out of prison weeks earlier. He couldn't have been part of these robberies, but he might know the men who were.
He had committed armored car robberies himself. As an employee of one of the armored car companies, he drove off with the truck one day.
It isn't long before Farrell gives investigators a big break.
I said, do you have any ideas of who the armored car crew is out doing these armored cars?
Farrell automatically states that Carl Tucker is probably involved.
And I was shocked that I hadn't even mentioned the fact to him that he had ordered the stolen cars. I set up a meeting with him and Special Agent Crawford in a Chinese restaurant in the middle of Chinatown.
We operated, I should say, with the source on a very confidential basis. There were only 2 people that knew that basically he existed during the course of this investigation. That was myself for months and months and Detective Coleman, because we were concerned not only for his safety, but any possible, because these people had contacts with different police authorities.
Steve Farrell explains he knows Carl Tucker fairly well as an acquaintance in Boston's criminal underworld, but they have never worked together on a job. He says Tucker is known on the streets as the King, and that he uses a legitimate business to launder dirty money from robberies. Farrell's help is a huge break for the investigation. His information is solid, and he wants to help shut this gang down. He volunteers to work as an FBI informant to gather more information on Carl Tucker.
I don't know how much longer I've got.
Farrell explains he's in failing health because of a heart condition and wants to make up for his criminal past before it's too late.
The source wanted to show his children that he had moral fiber. He wasn't just a criminal. And to prove it, this was his way of proving that he could do something. He wanted to prove that he wasn't the person that his kids thought he was.
Investigators are concerned for Farrell's safety and caution him that he'll have to enter a witness relocation program once the investigation is complete. Farrell is still willing to put his life on the line. It isn't long before Farrell establishes contact with Carl Tucker.
Hey, man, what you doing? All right. All right. Doing all right. Hey, buddy.
They were both aware of each other's backgrounds. They both, streetwise, trusted each other.
But trust in Boston's criminal underworld only goes so far. Tucker is slow to talk.
He always played it cool, never told him he was in the armored car business, never mentioned any other members of the gang. And this went on for quite a while.
Looking for work? Hey, might have something for you.
Farrell hints that he needs work, hoping Carl Tucker will bring him into the gang. But Tucker is too cautious to take the bait.
Nothing changed but time.
We were getting nowhere. And finally we said to the source, why don't you tell him that you have a relative that's in the armored car driving as a driver?
Tucker is intrigued. He asks Farrell if he could use his contacts at the armored car company to obtain what is known as a trip ticket.
That'll help us out a lot.
A trip ticket would provide valuable secret information to a professional armored car robber.
You're not giving him the key to the armored car, but you're giving him the location where the armored car would be, at what hour, and what kind of money it would have.
The trip ticket was so valuable to the robbers, again, because any professional that believes he has inside information, it's like having inside information on a race or a lottery.
Farrell offers to do his best to get the trip tickets. The FBI agents on the case win approval from the U.S. Attorney's Office to furnish Farrell with trip tickets to give to Carl Tucker.
It was kind of one of those things you had to really think long and hard and willing to be very dedicated. Once you gave this, it was your responsibility to make sure that that armored car started its route and finished its route without being robbed at some other location.
The tickets are for an armored car's Tuesday routes. The handoff goes down. The FBI has set the trap. Now all they can do is watch and see if Tucker takes the bait.
Everything good? That's great, thank you. You know how tough it was.
In order to solve a series of violent armored car robberies, the FBI hands a known criminal specific information for an armored car's Tuesday route. It is a big risk, but one they have to take if their informant Steve Farrell is ever to win the trust of the FBI's prime suspect, Carl Tucker. The plan works. With the gift of the trip tickets, Farrell gains Tucker's confidence.
Everything good?
Everything's great, thank you.
FBI technicians install a listening device in Steve Farrell's car to capture the increasingly open conversations Carl Tucker is having with the undercover source.
I'd have to say on this source that he was a natural. Always got direction from the FBI, things that you would want to say, basically not to entrap, that type of instruction, the legal instruction, but he knew the street as well as any seasoned FBI agent.
We only take a certain amount of money in a certain amount of time.
Carl Tucker begins to open up about his criminal enterprise with Farrell.
You splitting it up even?
Pretty much.
But he is always vague about the exact details of future jobs. Surveillance efforts slowly reveal the identities of Tucker's associates, men the FBI know all about. Men like James Murphy.
Jimmy Murphy always claimed he wrote the book on armored cars. He always liked to brag that he was the best armored car robber in the country.
Another associate is Michael Habich.
Well, Michael Habich was a career criminal. He'd been in prison most of his life. He always carrying a gun, a violent criminal, also an armored car robber.
Investigators know Fred Rogan is an old pro.
He had a history of bank robbery and armored car robberies. He was one of the usual suspects and lived within 200 or 300 yards of the Weymouth armored car robbery.
We don't get greedy. All right.
Farrell takes it all in,
Do our homework.
and so does the FBI.
Yeah, things are good. Low key. Low key.
Agents obtained the trip tickets from an armored car company that agreed to assist in the investigation. An armored car crew volunteers to help the task force. Agents warn the guards that a gang of armored car robbers will have trip tickets for their Tuesday routes. The agents assure the guards that they will not be alone.
Bad guys have trip tickets.
We'd placed an FBI agent in the armored truck, the potential victim truck, who was there basically to safeguard the guards, to be there in case something went wrong, to be there in the event that something happened earlier than we anticipated.
A team of investigators and agents will also tail the armored car. Over the next few months, agents observed the suspects shadowing the armored car.
They looked at the truck every Tuesday, and they timed it, what time it arrived and what time it left. And they knew exactly, same guards all the time. It was very interesting to watch them and not get caught ourselves.
Agents can never be sure whether any given Tuesday will be a dry run or the day the robbers strike. It adds up to a lot of long hours.
Every Tuesday for months, we started at 4 in the morning and didn't get through until the armored car left. And then we followed the armored car for the rest of its route to make sure that they weren't still following and going to take them down in another location.
June 1990, in Methuen, Massachusetts. FBI agents and an assault team watch what starts out as another dry run. Then, the suspects start to make their move.
Go, go, go!
June 1990, in Methuen, Massachusetts. An FBI task force watches a gang of dangerous armored car robbers. The gang spends months shadowing an armored car. An FBI task force believes the men got away with 2 robberies, one in 1987 and one in 1989, that netted them almost $2 million. Agents can never be sure if the suspects are rehearsing an upcoming robbery or if it's the real thing. At the bank in Methuen, the gang makes its move.
One of the vehicles they were driving made an overt move towards the armored truck.
Go, go, go!
Based on that, one of the surveillance vehicles followed just for safety purposes.
But the FBI task force and Special Agent Jim Crawford discover it's just another dress rehearsal. Being safe comes with a price.
Stand down, stand down.
Their prime suspect, Carl Tucker, could discover he's being watched.
Do a lot of homework too.
The FBI has an informant, an ex-con named Steve Farrell, who has earned Carl Tucker's confidence. Through listening devices installed in Farrell's car, agents learn that Tucker was spooked by the Methuen experience.
He indicated that he believed that this could possibly be a setup. And our source was reprimanded, did you tell anybody about the activities of this location? Based on that discussion, our source backed off and said, who's to say somebody else didn't mention something?
Farrell tells Tucker that they can't work together if they don't trust each other.
Get caught trying. Yeah, you're right. Procedures they have to follow. Right?
Tucker calms down and later tells Farrell that he and his crew will shift the robbery target to a bank in Abington, Massachusetts. The trip tickets the robbers are working with give precise times when the armored car arrives and leaves Abington, and the amount of cash on board.
When they targeted the Abington, it was believed they approximately had $2 million in that truck on a given run.
Over the next several months, the FBI task force watches Tucker and his men stalk the armored car as it delivers money to Abington. The long hours every Tuesday takes a toll on investigators and resources.
There was lots of pressure to get this done because every Tuesday, half the office in Boston was out on this case. The surveillance team, the SWAT team, the airplane, everyone was working.
Agents are concerned about the expense and fatigue caused by shadowing the robbers. So they instruct their source to tell Carl Tucker that the Abington Bank is closing its branch, and that on January 9th, the armored car will remove a vast amount of cash.
We held that carrot out. It was a solid gold carrot. The bank was closing. It's time to do it.
Go ahead. It was which one? It's going to go down tomorrow. And that's the day they're going to do a dry
Agents
run.
learn that Carl Tucker is planning a dry run on January 9th, 1991. This could be the dry run that turns into a robbery. Agents surveil members of Tucker's gang in the early hours of January 9th. They notice pre-dawn activity that suggests the gang is up to more than a dry run.
They were seen carrying what were believed to be bags containing weapons, the way they were being handled. We strongly believed then that they were going to possibly make a move and attempt to perpetrate this robbery.
The suspects arrive hours before the armored car is scheduled to show up. They stake out the location. They don't know they are not alone. The FBI task force is there. Agents quickly identify multiple vehicles containing suspects, including a van. The FBI assault team is prepared for a robbery attempt when the armored car arrives.
Get out, we're going to take them down quick.
There was high risk involved basically on apprehending these people. We believed they would be armed based on prior history.
But by 10:30 a.m., the armored car still has not shown up. It's running behind schedule, unusual in the armored car business. Both the robbers and law enforcement are on edge. Then, the robbers discover the surveillance effort and attempt to flee. Agents decide to take them down. The task force converges on all the suspects' cars at once. The agents know they are inside, but they don't know if the men are armed. They proceed with caution.
Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. Get your hands up. Get your hands up. Come on out. Come on out. Turn around. Turn around. Turn around.
Carl Tucker is taken into custody, along with two men from Ireland named Michael McNaught and Stephen Fitzpatrick. The old pro Fred Rogan had been standing guard outside a van.
Stop. Hold it right there.
He tries to walk away by acting like a bank customer. But the ruse doesn't work. Inside the robbers' vehicles, investigators find several items that prove Abington was definitely not a dry run. Ski masks, police scanners, smoke grenades. The van had enough items to start a small war. The armored car finally arrives nearly a half hour behind schedule. Agents asked the driver why the armored car was so late.
We got stopped for speeding by the state police, he said. And then, what did you say to the trooper? We told him we were on our way to get robbed. And FBI was waiting for us. The trooper didn't believe them and gave them the ticket.
In the end, all of the participants in the attempted armored car robbery in Abington were convicted. Michael Habich was sentenced to 19 years. The oldest of the group, Fred Rogan, got 10.5 years. As did the Irishmen Michael McNaught and Stephen Fitzpatrick. Carl Tucker received 19 years. James Murphy was the only suspect tied to the Fitchburg robbery. A witness saw him behind the wheel of the getaway car. Murphy fought his charges and received a 65-year sentence.
They were all criminals to the core. They lived a life of crime, and they were all repeat offenders, and they never got out of the business. And I assume that they're out of it now because there have been no more armored car robberies.
The FBI's chief source, Steve Farrell, provided damning testimony that helped convict the robbers.
I was with the prosecutors during the trial. The source's life was threatened by one of the suspects, then threatened his life in my presence.
Because of the threats against him, Steve Farrell went into the witness protection program. He died a few years later, knowing he had at least in part made up for his criminal past.
I would say with the source involved in this case, redeem himself, I would agree. He risked his life.
FBI investigators were never able to charge anyone with the Weymouth robbery. But if the Abington robbers perpetrated the job, it was a crime that came with a steep price. Each of them will spend at least a decade in prison.